The tension in the courtroom was the kind you could feel pressing against your skin. Every chair was filled, every juror sat with an expression that could be carved from stone, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead like a low warning. This trial had gripped the small U.S. town for months. People had lined up outside for hours, hoping to witness the verdict in a case that had become both a legal battleground and a community obsession. The defendant sat at the table with his attorney, appearing calm on the outside, but tapping his fingers against his thigh under the table. He'd been accused of a string of home invasions, bold burglaries that had left families terrified to sleep at night. The prosecution had painted him as a clever, elusive predator. The defense insisted he was an unlucky man, caught in a web of circumstantial evidence. The trial had been intense, the kind of case that makes people whisper about it over coffee and debate in grocery store aisles. Every day had brought its own share of drama-heated cross-examinations, witnesses contradicting themselves, forensic experts delivering confusing testimony. By the time the second week rolled around, most people believed they'd already seen every twist the case had to offer. And then, without warning, the prosecutor called a surprise witness. Murmurs swept through the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. A few reporters in the back scrambled to check their notes, wondering who this could be. The defense attorney arched an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, curious but keeping his expression neutral. The door at the side of the room opened, and in walked a little girl, no older than 7. She was small for her age, with thin arms and a neat braid that swung gently as she walked. Her hand was wrapped tightly around her mother's, her other hand clutching a small stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Her wide brown eyes scanned the room quickly before darting toward the floor, avoiding the sea of strangers staring at her. The reaction was immediate. People in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other, "Why on earth was a child here in a case involving violent break-ins?" She looked like she belonged in a classroom, not a courtroom. The defense attorney smirked faintly, leaning over to whisper something to the defendant. The body language said it all. He thought this was a stunt, a desperate move by the prosecution to tug at the jury's heartstrings. After all, what could a 7-year-old possibly know that would matter in a case this complex? The girl's mother guided her to the witness stand, but the child's gaze was elsewhere. She wasn't looking at the jury or the judge, or even the prosecutor. Her eyes had locked on something, or rather, someone at the far corner of the room. A police K-9 sat there quietly with his handler, a tall officer in uniform. The dog, a large German shepherd named Rex, was motionless except for the occasional flick of his ears. His gaze was calm but alert, the way working dogs always seemed to be watching everything without giving away what they were thinking. The girl slowed as she approached the stand, her steps faltering for just a moment. Her stuffed rabbit dangled from her fingers, the worn fabric swaying slightly. She tilted her head, her eyes never leaving the dog. Something about the way she was looking at him caught the attention of more than one person in the room. The handler noticed it too. His posture stiffened slightly, and he glanced down at Rex, who was now staring back at the girl with an intensity that felt almost human. It was subtle, but there was recognition in the way his ears pricked forward. The judge gave a small, polite cough, signaling for the room to settle. The bailiff stepped forward to swear in the witness, speaking in a softer tone than usual. The girl repeated the oath in a quiet voice, barely audible over the rustle of paper in the room. She sat down in the oversized chair, her feet swinging above the floor. The prosecutor approached slowly, careful not to tower over her. He smiled gently, but there was a flicker of something sharper in his eyes, a keen awareness that something important was about to happen. The first few questions were simple, designed to make her feel comfortable. What was her name? How old was she? Did she know why she was here today? She answered in short sentences, her voice steady but small. But then the prosecutor asked a question that seemed almost out of place. Do you recognize anyone here in the courtroom today? The room seemed to hold its breath. The girl didn't look at the defendant. She didn't glance at the jury, or the lawyers, or the judge. Instead, she turned her head slowly and pointed her small finger toward the corner of the room. Toward Rex. There was a ripple of confused murmuring. The defense attorney's smirk widened. Was she accusing the dog? The judge's brows furrowed, clearly puzzled. The handler looked between the girl and Rex, unsure what to make of it. The prosecutor hesitated, sensing there was more here than met the eye. You're pointing at Rex? He asked carefully. The girl nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. Then, in a voice just loud enough for the microphones to catch, she said two words that made the air feel suddenly colder. Bad man. The murmuring stopped instantly. You could have heard a pin drop. Rex didn't move, but his eyes stayed fixed on her, unblinking. The defense attorney's smirk faded. And for the first time that day, the prosecutor's calm expression broke into something else entirely, a spark of realization that the trial was about to take a very unexpected turn. The words bad man still hung in the air, chilling everyone in the courtroom. The judge blinked once, twice, his expression tightening, but he didn't interrupt. The jurors shifted in their seats, exchanging uneasy glances. The defense attorney straightened, his smirk gone, his pen pausing mid-scribble. The prosecutor leaned in slightly, his voice careful, almost coaxing. Sweetheart, can you tell us more about that? The little girl didn't answer right away. She looked down at her stuffed rabbit, stroking its frayed ear with her thumb. Her mother, seated on a bench close to the witness stand, gave her an encouraging nod. The child took a shaky breath, but her eyes didn't leave the German shepherd, sitting at the corner of the room. For a moment, it seemed she might retreat into silence again. That was, after all, how it had been for months, an unbroken wall of quiet since that terrifying night. Her mother had tried, the detectives had tried, even child specialists had tried, but the girl had remained locked away inside herself whenever the subject came up. Until now. The prosecutor had not brought her in on a whim. He had studied every detail of her history with this case. She had been inside her home the night of one of the most brazen burglaries in town, a series of crimes that had left entire neighborhoods installing new locks, buying security cameras, and organizing nightly patrols. But no one had ever been able to get her to describe what she'd seen. Not once. Many had assumed she simply didn't remember after all. She had been woken in the middle of the night, scared out of her mind. But the prosecutor suspected something else. He believed she remembered everything. And that memory had been locked away by fear. He had one shot at unlocking it now. The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, counselor. Let's hear what she has to say. The defense sat reluctantly, though his eyes never left the girl. The prosecutor tried again, his voice warm but deliberate. Can you tell us why you pointed at Rex just now? The girl's brow furrowed, because he was there. The statement made several jurors lean forward. The prosecutor kept his tone calm. There, where? In my house, she said softly. That night. The gallery erupted in murmurs. The bailiff called for silence. The prosecutor's heart rate kicked up, though his face remained steady. You saw Rex in your house? Yes. She clutched the rabbit tighter. He was barking, loud, chasing the bad man. The handlers. Eyes widened slightly. Rex's head tilted at the sound of her voice, as if he recognized it. The prosecutor's mind raced. According to police reports, Rex had been deployed during the burglary, chasing a suspect through several backyards before losing him near a construction site. The suspect had never been identified. The defendant in this case had been arrested weeks later, but his capture had nothing to do with Rex's pursuit. At least, that's what everyone thought. The girl glanced nervously at the rows of strangers watching her. "He was in my room," she whispered. "The bad man. He took Mommy's necklace. He saw me, and I—" She trailed off, her lip trembling. "You don't have to be afraid," the prosecutor said gently. "You're safe now." She shook her head slightly. "No, he's here." The room went dead silent. The judge leaned forward. "What do you mean? He's here?" The girl's small voice carried farther than anyone expected. "The bad man. He's in this room." Every head turned, scanning the courtroom. A defendant sat stiffly, but the girl wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were darting toward the gallery. The defense attorney shot to his feet again. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." "Sit down," the judge ordered, sharper this time. The prosecutor could feel the weight of every gaze in the room shifting toward the little girl. "Can you tell us who you saw that night?" Her breathing quickened. "I don't know his name, but I remember his face, and I saw it when I came in today." The murmurs grew louder again, until the bailiff's deep voice cut through them. In the back corner, the canine handler stood straighter, his grip tightening on Rex's leash. The dog's ears were fully upright now, his eyes locked on something. In the room, his body language shifted subtly from calm observer to predator scenting a trail. The judge called for a 10-minute recess, but the prosecutor wasn't about to waste it. He moved closer to the stand, speaking in a voice only the girl and the nearest few people could hear. "Where is he now?" She swallowed. Her hand shook as she lifted her finger and pointed not at the defendant, not at the lawyers, but at a man sitting in the back row. A man no one had been paying much attention to. The canine's head whipped in the same direction, his muscles tensing like coiled steel. The handler followed the line of the girl's finger and frowned. He recognized the man as one of the courthouse maintenance workers. He'd been in the building every day of the trial, wearing the same dark uniform, pushing the same cart of cleaning supplies. Harmless, or so it seemed. But now, under the weight of the girl's stare and Rex's sudden, razor-sharp focus, the man looked different. His posture stiffened. His eyes flicked toward the exits. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. The recess had barely begun, but something had shifted. The atmosphere in the courtroom was no longer tense in the usual legal sense. It had become the kind of tension you feel right before something happens. And in the far corner, Rex let out a low, rolling growl. Rex's growl was low, almost imperceptible at first, but in the heavy silence of the courtroom, it rolled across the air like distant thunder. His handler, Officer Mark Jensen, felt the subtle shift in the leash, a gentle pull forward, the kind Rex only gave when he'd caught a scent or recognized something from memory. Officer Jensen had worked with Rex for 4 years. He'd seen him detect narcotics hidden in airtight containers, find lost hikers miles from the trail, and track suspects through rain and darkness. But this growl was different. It wasn't the excited sound of a dog on the scent of drugs or the protective bark of a guard dog. It was a deep, instinctive warning. On the witness stand, the girl still hadn't moved her finger. Her wide eyes were locked on the man at the back of the courtroom. The man sat rigid, trying to keep his expression neutral, but the slight twitch in his jaw betrayed something annoyance, maybe. Or fear. The judge hadn't yet realized the shift in the room, but the prosecutor had. He stepped away from the witness stand and glanced toward the back, his eyes narrowing. The gallery, sensing the growing unease, began to turn their heads, one by one toward the same spot. A ripple of movement passed through the benches. The man at the back reached up casually to scratch his neck, as if the stares meant nothing. But Officer Jensen had seen that move before. He recognized the tightness in the man's shoulders, the subtle shift in his breathing. This was someone calculating his next move. Rex took another step forward, his nails clicking softly on the wooden floor. "Easy, boy," Jensen murmured under his breath, though his eyes never left the man. The girl broke her silence, her voice quivering. "That's him." A collective shiver passed through the courtroom. "That's who?" the prosecutor asked, moving back toward her. "The bad man," she whispered. Her voice might have been soft, but in the microphone, it carried through the speakers with unnerving clarity. The man in the back swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. The defense attorney, sensing things spiraling beyond control, stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I object to this entire—" "Sit down, counselor," the judge cut in, his tone sharp. "We're not in a sidebar. The witness will continue." The girl clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. "He came into my room. He opened Mommy's jewelry box. He saw me, and then—" she faltered, her eyes wetting with tears. The prosecutor leaned in, speaking softly. "And then what happened?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the courtroom microphones caught it anyway. "Then the dog came." All eyes shifted toward Rex, who was now fully upright, his gaze unwavering. The prosecutor nodded. "Rex?" She nodded. "He barked loud, chased the bad man away. I saw him run." Jensen's grip on the leash tightened. His mind was racing back to that night. He remembered the call of burglary in progress, a suspect fleeing. Rex had led him across yards, over fences, until the trail suddenly ended. They'd searched for hours afterward, but found nothing. And now, months later, the dog was standing here, pointing with his body language as clearly as the girl's trembling finger. The man in the back shifted in his seat again. His eyes darted to the side door, an emergency exit, Jensen noted. The prosecutor caught the movement too. "Your Honor, I'd like the bailiffs to keep the exits secured." The judge nodded. "Do it." Two uniformed officers moved toward the doors. The man's gaze followed them, then snapped back to the front, as if realizing he was now boxed in. Rex gave a short, sharp bark that made half the courtroom flinch. His ears were forward, tail stiff, body leaning in the direction of the man. Jensen crouched slightly, keeping one hand on Rex's harness, his eyes never leaving the target. He knew the signs Rex wasn't reacting to nerves in the room. This was recognition. The girl spoke again, more firmly this time. "He was in my room. He smiled at me. I couldn't move." The prosecutor looked back at her. "But you remember his face?" She nodded. "I'll never forget it." Rex barked again, louder this time, causing the man in the back to flinch. That tiny reaction was all Jensen needed to confirm his suspicion. This wasn't just courtroom drama, this was an identification in real time. The man's hand slid down to the edge of the bench, gripping it tightly. His breathing was faster now. His leg began to bounce. Every instinct in Jensen's body screamed that the man was seconds away from making a move. The judge looked unsettled, but kept control of the room. "Let's maintain order here." The girl's mother leaned forward, placing her hands on the railing, as if ready to shield her daughter from some unseen threat. The prosecutor took a calculated risk. "Ma'am, can you tell the court exactly where you saw him that night?" The girl's voice was stronger now. "At the end of my bed." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Rex let out another growl, this one deeper than before. The man in the back shifted his weight forward slightly, as if preparing to stand. Jensen's eyes locked with his, and in that instant, both men understood each other. The handler tightened his grip, bracing himself for what he was certain was about to happen. And then, without warning, the man glanced toward the emergency exit again, and the muscles in his legs tensed. Jensen leaned in close to Rex and whispered one word he hadn't needed in months. Ready. The entire courtroom was holding its breath. The girl's finger, small and steady now, was still aimed directly at the man in the back row. Every eye in the room followed her line of sight until all focus was pinned on him. The man didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He just sat there, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening and relaxing like a slow, involuntary pulse. The silence was shattered by the prosecutor's voice, steady but carrying weight. Let the record reflect that the witness is indicating a person in the gallery. The defense attorney shot to his feet immediately. Objection. Your Honor, this is an outrageous stunt meant to prejudice the jury. There has been no foundation laid for this kind of overruled, the judge said sharply, his gaze flicking between the girl and the man in the back. Proceed. The defense. Attorney's mouth opened to argue further, but the look the judge gave him was enough to shut him down. He sank back into his chair, but his eyes were locked on the man in the gallery now, too. The prosecutor turned back to the girl. Sweetheart, I know this is scary, but you're doing really well. Can you tell us who is the bad man? The girl's voice was quiet, but unwavering now. He's here. That simple phrase made the air seem to drop 10 degrees. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. A woman in the second row crossed her arms tight over her chest. A man near the aisle leaned forward, watching closely. The judge leaned toward his microphone. When you say he's here, do you mean he's in this room? Yes, the girl didn't blink. The prosecutor glanced toward the gallery, his eyes locking on the man. This man you're pointing at, did you see him the night of the burglary? The girl swallowed. He came into my room. He opened my mom's jewelry box. He looked at me. She clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. He smiled. A ripple of uneasy murmuring rolled through the courtroom. The bailiff immediately called for silence, his voice echoing off the walls. The man in the back shifted, adjusting his jacket. His eyes darted not toward the defendant, but toward the emergency exit. Rex's reaction was immediate. The German shepherd's ears snapped forward, his head lowering slightly, his body tense as a drawn bow. A guttural growl rumbled from his chest, low but unmistakable. The handler, Officer Jensen, tightened his grip on the leash, every muscle in his body coiled for action. The judge noticed the movement. Bailiffs, secure that door. 2 uniformed officers stepped away from their posts, moving toward the emergency exit in long, deliberate strides. The man's eyes followed them. His foot began tapping lightly against the floor, nervous energy spilling into motion. Jensen saw it. He knew the signs. The prosecutor leaned toward the girl again. You said Rex was there that night? She nodded quickly. He barked and barked. The bad man ran away. He tried to jump over the fence, but Rex almost caught him. Jensen's stomach tightened. This detail hadn't been in any police report, because they'd never been able to get it from her before. Now, under oath, in front of a courtroom, she was connecting the man in the gallery to the night Rex had given chase. The man's breathing was visible, now his chest rising and falling faster than before. Sweat dotted his forehead, despite the cool temperature in the room. Rex gave a sharp bark that made several jurors flinch. His gaze stayed locked on the man. The judge shifted in his chair. Sir, he said to the man in the back, his tone carrying authority, please stand. The man didn't move. I said stand, the judge repeated, his voice firm. Instead, the man's hand slid inside his jacket. Hands where I can see them, barked one of the bailiffs, already moving toward him. The man shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. In one smooth motion, He bolted toward the side aisle, aiming for the emergency exit. The room erupted in chaos, jurors gasping, reporters scrambling to capture the moment, spectators shouting. "Stop him!" the prosecutor yelled. Jensen didn't wait for an order. "Rex!" The single command was all the dog needed. The German shepherd lunged forward, his claws skittering against the floor for a half-second before finding traction. Jensen held the leash just long enough to steer him, then let it play out so Rex could close the distance. The man sprinted down the aisle, shoving people aside. A woman cried out as she was pushed against the wooden railing. The bailiffs tried to intercept, but the suspect's head start gave him a slim chance until Rex's powerful body slammed into motion. Spectators pressed themselves against the benches as the dog tore past, his deep barks echoing in the high-ceilinged room. The man glanced back once, just long enough to see 80 pounds of muscle and teeth barreling toward him. The fear on his face was instant. Jensen was right behind them, his boots pounding the floor. "Don't move. Stay down," he shouted to the people in the aisle. The man made it to the emergency door and shoved the push bar, but the bailiffs had already locked it. The metal rattled uselessly. He spun to look for another escape, and that's when Rex hit him. The impact knocked the suspect off balance, slamming him into the wall. His head struck the plaster with a dull thud, and the stuffed backpack he carried slipped off his shoulder. Tools spilled out: crowbars, pliers, screwdrivers, and something that looked suspiciously like a lock-picking set. The girl, still in the witness stand, clutched her rabbit and watched with wide eyes as the man struggled on the floor, Rex's jaws locked around the sleeve of his jacket. The dog growled, his body planted firmly to keep the suspect from moving. Jensen reached them in seconds, pinning the man's other arm to the ground. "Don't move," he ordered, yanking the man's free hand behind his back and snapping on a cuff. The courtroom was a storm of noise, now jurors whispering in shock, reporters firing off camera shutters, spectators craning their necks for a better view. And up on the stand, the little girl's lips moved silently as she hugged her rabbit tighter. "That's him," she whispered again. The air inside the courtroom felt heavier than before. Every pair of eyes seemed fixed on the canine sitting obediently near Officer Daniels, as if the dog itself had become a witness on trial. Emily, her hands still trembling, kept her gaze low, but her words from earlier, "He knows," echoed in everyone's minds. The defense attorney adjusted his tie, clearly unsettled, while the prosecutor exchanged a sharp glance with the judge. Officer Daniels had worked with Max, the canine, for years. The dog was more than just a partner. He was a silent guardian trained to detect fear, deceit, and even traces of substances invisible to the human eye. Daniels shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the moment. Max, sensing the tension, remained perfectly still, but his sharp amber eyes scanned the room like a detective piecing together clues. The judge cleared his throat. "Ms. Emily," he said gently, "can you explain what you meant earlier?" His voice held an uncharacteristic softness, a mixture of curiosity and caution. Emily hesitated, looking toward her mother for reassurance. Her mother gave a subtle nod. "When I saw him," Emily said, pointing once more to Max, "he looked at me the same way he did that night." The statement sent a murmur rippling through the courtroom. Daniels tensed. "The night of the incident?" the prosecutor asked, leaning forward. Emily nodded. "I was hiding in the kitchen. I heard voices, shouting. Then the door crashed open, and Max ran in." Her eyes watered. "But he wasn't with the officer at first. He was with him." She pointed toward the defendant. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Daniel's heart pounded. He had been told Max was in the police vehicle until backup arrived that night. How could Emily have seen him with the suspect before officers were even on the scene? The defense attorney rose quickly. "Objection." The witness is a minor and overruled, the judge said sharply, his eyes narrowing. Proceed. Daniel's thoughts raced. There was only one way Max could have been with the suspect, if someone had used him before official entry. And that meant the chain of events the defense had been pushing might be far from the truth. Max suddenly shifted his gaze, locking eyes with the defendant. A low rumble began in his throat, quiet but unmistakable. The sound made the hair on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. The defendant's jaw tightened, his gaze hardening. It was as if an unspoken recognition had passed between man and dog. Emily continued, her voice gaining strength. Max was barking, not like now. It was angry, like he was trying to stop him. Then I heard a loud bang, and Max yelped. When the police came, he was back in the car. Gasps erupted from the gallery. Daniel's stomach churned. Max had been taken for medical treatment after that night, but the official report claimed his injury happened after the arrest. If Emily's version was true, someone had hidden the real sequence of events. The prosecutor, sensing the gravity, turned to Daniels. Officer, is this possible? Daniels hesitated. He had sworn to protect the truth, but revealing it could destroy careers. Still, Max's unwavering stare at the defendant left no room for doubt. Yes, he said slowly, his voice like a weight dropping in the silent room. It's possible. The defendant shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. For the first time since the trial began. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but his eyes kept flicking toward Max. The judge leaned forward. We will take a recess, he announced, his tone clipped. Both counsels, in my chambers. Now. As the courtroom began to clear, Max stood, his posture alert. He stepped closer to Emily, his nose brushing her hand as if offering comfort. Daniels watched in silence, a knot tightening in his chest. Emily looked up at him. He remembers, she said softly, and for a fleeting second, Daniels believed her completely. The recess would change everything. Hidden truths had a way of clawing their way into the open, and in this case, it seemed the K-9 wasn't just a silent observer. He was the key witness no one had counted on. Outside, reporters swarmed, sensing a seismic shift in the trial's direction. Inside, behind closed doors, the real battle for the truth was just beginning. Daniels knew one thing. After what Emily had revealed, the case would never be the same again. And neither would Max. The courtroom felt as though it had stopped breathing. Every eye shifted toward the tall wooden doors as they creaked open. The judge's gavel tapped twice, summoning order, but whispers still snaked through the audience. The bailiff stepped aside to let in a man in his late 40s, dressed in a worn suit that looked like it had been pulled from the back of a closet. His expression was tight, as if each step toward the witness stand carried the weight of years of silence. Nobody seemed to recognize him until the prosecution nodded with grim satisfaction. Mr. Paul Henley, the prosecutor announced, please take the stand. Lena's chest tightened. She had never heard the name before, but she noticed Officer Briggs, the K-9 handler, shift uncomfortably. Even Max, the German shepherd lying at his feet, raised his head with sudden alertness. Henley was sworn in, his voice gravelly as he recited the oath. He sat, but his gaze immediately found the dog. His Adam's apple bobbed once. That's him, he said quietly. Who's him? The prosecutor prompted. Henley took a shaky breath. That dog was there. The night everything happened. A ripple of confusion swept through the room. Dogs didn't do crimes. They helped solve them. But Henley's tone wasn't accusatory toward Max. It was haunted, as if the memory still burned behind his eyes. The prosecutor leaned in. Please explain to the court. Henley's story poured out. 2 years earlier, he'd been working as a night security guard at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, the same warehouse tied to the criminal operation in this case. He described hearing shouts, footsteps, and then seeing Max, the K9, racing inside alongside two men in plain clothes. Henley swore that one of those men was not a police officer, but someone later identified in gang records, a dangerous enforcer. Nicknamed Viper, the implication was explosive. If true, it meant the K9 had been used in an unsanctioned raid, possibly tied to corrupt officers and illegal evidence collection. Defense attorney Morgan pounced immediately. Mr. Henley, you have no proof this wasn't a legitimate police operation. Are you suggesting law enforcement conspired with known criminals? Henley's gaze hardened. I'm saying what I saw, and I saw Max used by someone who wasn't wearing a badge. The gallery erupted in murmurs again. Lena's mind raced, disconnected to the little girl's words. He knows. The he might have been Max, but the knowing could point to what Max had been forced to witness in the past. If Max's handler was involved, it would explain the girl's fear and the strange tension whenever the dog was near her. Officer Briggs finally spoke, his voice taut. That is a lie. Max has only ever been deployed under proper authority. But Henley didn't flinch. Then why did the man he was with threaten me to keep my mouth shut? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a battered phone. I kept the message he left me. I knew someday I might need it. The prosecutor quickly asked permission to play the audio. The judge hesitated but allowed it. A moment later, the recording filled the room with static, followed by a deep, menacing voice. Forget what you saw that night, or you won't make it to your next shift. In the background, faint but unmistakable, was the sound of a dog barking. Sharp, urgent, exactly like Max's bark. The sound hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. Even Max gave a low whine, ears twitching. Officer Briggs' jaw tightened, but his eyes darted away for the briefest second. The judge ordered a recess, the tension too thick to continue without order. As the room emptied, Lena stayed in her seat, staring at Max. The dog met her gaze, not with aggression, but something like recognition, almost as if he knew she was getting close to the truth. In the hallway, Henley was surrounded by reporters. He refused to elaborate, saying only, "It's not just about the dog. It's about the people who control him." Lena's hands shook as she jotted notes. The little girl's two chilling words had seemed like a child's fear. Now they felt like a warning. Max had been part of something bigger, and someone in that courtroom was desperate to keep it buried. As she closed her notebook, she couldn't shake the feeling that the most dangerous person in this case wasn't on trial. Yet. The courtroom had been buzzing since the lunch recess, whispers echoing off the high ceilings like restless ghosts. Every person inside felt the tension knot tighter as the clock edged toward the reconvening hour. The jurors filed back in, faces tight with anticipation and confusion. They had seen strange cases before, but nothing like this, nothing that hinged on the testimony of a child who had barely spoken a handful of words all week. Mia sat beside her guardian, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes darted once toward Rex, the K9, who sat obediently near the bailiff. The German shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of her voice whenever she whispered. Observers had started noticing it, the way the dog seemed unusually attentive to her, almost as if he knew her beyond the training yard. The defense attorney, Mr. Linton, stood up slowly, adjusting his glasses as if buying time. "Your Honor," he began, "before we proceed with further evidence, my client wishes to make a statement. But, in light of recent revelations, I request that we first hear from Miss Maya one more time." The prosecutor immediately objected. "This is highly irregular. The witness is a child, already questioned at length." Judge Harper's gavel rapped once, overruled. Given the unusual circumstances, I will allow a few questions brief and directly relevant. She turned to Maya. Sweetheart, can you answer just a couple more? Maya nodded faintly. The room seemed to draw a collective breath. Linton approached slowly, his voice soft but deliberate. Maya, when you looked at Rex earlier, you said 2 words. Can you tell us again what they were? Her gaze didn't waver this time. Bad man? Can you tell us who you meant? She pointed not at the defendant, not at the police officer beside him, but at a man in the second row of the gallery. Gasps erupted instantly. The man's face drained of color. That's Detective Harris, the prosecutor stammered, visibly rattled. He's not even, but Maya interrupted, her voice suddenly stronger. Rex knows. He saw. The judge ordered immediate silence, but the gallery's whispers refused to die down. Linton took a deep breath. Maya, how does Rex know? She hesitated, then said something that made even the court reporter pause her typing. He was there, with the bad man. The night my mommy, she choked off, blinking back tears. The night she never came home. Every eye in the room swung to Detective Harris, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Judge Harper ordered him to remain where he was, as bailiffs subtly moved to block the exits. Rex, still sitting calmly, suddenly gave a low growl, deep, warning, protective. It reverberated through the air like a living accusation. In that moment, it wasn't just a child's testimony hanging in the balance. It was the unraveling of an entire case. If Harris had been involved in the crime, then everything they thought they knew was wrong. Harris stood abruptly, his voice shaking. This is insane. A child's pointing and a dog's reaction? That's not evidence. But Linton was ready. He held up a small flash drive. Actually, it is. Because this, he said, contains footage from a body cam that was conveniently missing from the police archive. Until now, the judge leaned forward. Play it. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy night footage. The camera caught Rex on patrol, tail still, ears pricked, and a figure moving in the shadows. The timestamp matched the night of the crime. The figure stepped into view. It was Harris, not in uniform, but carrying something large and wrapped in a blanket. The courtroom fell into an icy silence, broken only by the faint hum of the playback. Harris's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, but 2 bailiffs were on him in an instant, restraining him as murmurs surged through the room. Maya looked. At Rex, the dog's tail gave a single wag, as if to say, "We did it." The judge ordered Harris into custody and called for an immediate recess. The jurors looked stunned, like people who had just watched the ground shift beneath their feet. And Maya, she just sat there quietly, the weight of weeks of fear slowly peeling away. She wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing she had to say before this was truly over. The courtroom was so silent that the hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed deafening. Everyone was frozen in the wake of the girl's revelation, her trembling voice echoing in their minds. He knows. Those 2 words had cracked open the entire trial like a fault line, and now the tension inside the room was stretched so tight it felt like the air itself could shatter. Officer Daniels stood near Rex, the K9, his expression unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as Rex's focus stayed locked on him. The prosecutor moved forward slowly, her tone careful. Your Honor, I request the K9 be brought forward for a demonstration. The defense immediately objected, but the judge, still visibly shaken, overruled without hesitation. Proceed, he ordered. The handler unclipped Rex's lead, giving him a simple hand signal. The dog padded toward Officer Daniels, his movements low and deliberate, his body tense. He stopped just a few feet away, growling, not loud, but deep enough to raise goosebumps. Daniels stiffened, his hand twitching near his belt. The handler gave another command, and Rex circled him once, sniffing intently, before stopping at his side, sitting stiffly, his gaze unwavering. That, the handler explained, is his alert for someone he recognizes from a scent tied to a crime scene. The words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled across the benches. The prosecutor's voice cut through the noise. And just to be clear, Officer Daniels has never officially been at that scene in question. The handler shook his head. Not to my knowledge. Daniels's lawyer leapt to his feet, shouting objections, but it was too late. The jury had seen the demonstration. They'd seen the girl's raw fear, the dog's unmistakable recognition, and Daniels's thin mask of composure cracking at the edges. The judge called for a recess. The moment the gavel struck, the gallery exploded in whispers. Reporters scrambled to jot down notes. The girl clung to her foster mother, tears streaming down her face, but there was relief there too. She had finally been heard. In the hallway, the prosecutor pulled the girl aside gently. "You were brave today," she told her. "What you did might have just changed everything." The girl nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rex remembered, just like I did." Her small hand reached out to pat the dog's head. For a moment, the grimness of the day lifted. Back inside, when the trial resumed, the prosecution unveiled new evidence, video footage, recently retrieved, showing a shadowy figure near the crime scene, weeks before the incident. The frame-by-frame analysis revealed just enough. The gait, the posture, the slight limp. It matched Officer Daniels exactly, and the timing was damning. Daniels's face turned pale, his lawyer scrambling to regain control. But the damage was irreversible. Witness after witness testified, the narrative shifting rapidly from doubt to clarity. The jury watched with rapt attention, their expressions hardening as the pieces fell into place. By late afternoon, Daniels was no longer just a witness in uniform, he was the accused. The judge approved a motion for his immediate arrest, pending further investigation. When the bailiff moved toward him, Rex stood too, as if instinctively recognizing the moment justice stepped forward. Daniels's voice cracked as he protested. "This is a mistake. I served this city for years." But no one in the room seemed convinced anymore. The girl sat quietly, watching as the man who had haunted her was led away in handcuffs. Her eyes didn't show triumph, only a deep, weary sense of closure. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to exhale. The verdict would come later, but in the hearts of everyone who witnessed that day, they already knew the truth. A child's courage, a dog's unshakable memory, and the persistence of justice had torn down a facade that might otherwise have stood forever. Outside the courthouse, the crowd waited. News cameras swiveled toward the girl and Rex as they exited, the handler walking beside them. When a reporter asked her how she found the strength to speak, she looked at Rex and then at the camera. "Because he didn't forget, and neither did I." The handler gave Rex a scratch behind the ears. "He's just doing his job," he said with a small smile. But deep down, everyone there knew it was more than that. This wasn't just training. It was loyalty, instinct, and truth that no one could hide from. The prosecutor later admitted that without that moment in court, without those two chilling words, Daniels might have walked free. But instead, the system had been jolted awake, reminded that sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected partnerships. That night, as the courthouse lights dimmed and the city settled into its usual rhythm, one thing was certain. The memory of that trial would linger for years. It wasn't just the scandal of a corrupt officer. It was the moment the child's voice and a K-9's loyalty converged to expose the truth. And for those who had been there, it was a story they would tell again and again. A reminder that even in the darkest cases, justice has a way of finding its way forward.